or not. All right, at 6:30, I'll call the meeting to order. Please stand for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item is the consent agenda. Unless there's opposition, we'll look to approve under the consent agenda the minutes from the October 6th meeting and 7B, which is a certification of lead evaluators. Can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
Yes.
Thank you, Beth. And we have a second.
Yes.
Thank you, Colleen. All in favor?
Doesn't matter.
6-0, motion passes. For the good of the cause, before we get into the good of the cause, at our last meeting we had our first significant group of individuals at the meeting, so I thought it a good idea to enclose or include the policy pertaining to public comments and public participation by at board meetings. So that policy is listed for you. Hopefully you all had the opportunity or took the opportunity to look at it. It's somewhat specific on how things run, how things are managed, and there's no alternative reason for that. I just thought it'd be a good idea to put in. I carry it with me at all meetings, so thank you, Mary. So for the good of the cause, the board encourages public participation on school-related matters at board meetings. This allows for public participation a period not to exceed 30 minutes. It's been set aside at all meetings. We invite anyone to speak. It's a general rule that public participation will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Anyone who wishes to speak must state their name and sign in the sheet. Do we have anybody who'd like to address the board? No? Silence, great. Moving right along. Reports. First report is the student liaisons, the high school student council. In accordance with our strategic goal number 1, students first and foremost, which states that the Board of Education will request from various student groups one presentation to the board on a quarterly basis, and then policy 2245 states that student liaisons, the Board of Education meets periodically with student representatives from each school in order to allow students to express their views, exchange information with the board, and broaden the board's base of information and promote an environment that has encouraged understanding and trust. This evening we have the Lake Placid High School, 3 members of the Lake Placid High School Student Council. Roger?
Right, and they're actually not members of the student
Oh,
council,
they're not?
members of the student
Okay.
body, but
Student
but
body.
they are officers in their class, and I think
Okay.
they're all
My
presidents of their
apologies.
class, isn't that right?
Good.
So,
Thank you.
thanks, I'll just take a minute. This
Sure.
is one of my favorite meetings, because the school board meets often, and we're always filled with grown-ups and serious conversations and very orderly processes, but rarely do we have the benefit of just having students here. And so we want this to shift from a kind of a formal procedural effort to a conversation. And to let the conversation get started, I thought it'd be a good idea, first of all, to have everybody introduce themselves. And that would be for you to introduce yourselves, and then I would ask board members also to introduce yourselves. And maybe while you're at it, just give a little snippet of the kinds of things that you do in school, like what grade you're in and what you might be involved in, that kind of thing. So why don't we start? Lydia, are you okay starting?
Sure.
Why don't you start by introducing yourself a little bit?
Okay, I'm Lydia Bullock. I'm the president of the sophomore class. I play 3 sports. I'm part of tons of clubs after school. Yeah. Sure.
My name is Emma Bishop. I am the senior class president. I play one sport. I am on the National Honor Society. I'm actually vice president of our chapter. And I'm very, very involved in the music program.
My name is Astrid Livesey. I am the freshman class president. I am part of the theater program and a few after-school clubs.
And Esther, if you don't mind me mentioning, you recently moved here and transferred here, so you might have an even different and more unique perspective than we're used to. So I think that's great. I hope you get to contribute that. So why don't we start? You want to start?
Sure. I'm Karen Angelopoulos. I am the superintendent's secretary, and I'm also the board clerk.
And I'm Roger Catania. I'm the superintendent of schools.
Colleen Locke, a general board member.
I'm Jeff Brownell, board member, and my son John is in sophomore class, as Lydia well knows, and welcome.
I'm Rick Preston. I'm privileged to be the president of this.
I'm Martha Spear, I'm a general board member.
Joan Howard Valentine, I'm a general board member.
Liam Kennelly, I'm a alumni. I graduated in the year 2000, and I also was involved in theater and music, and I'm a general board member. So happy to have you here.
I'm Dana Wood, the new business manager.
Great. So thanks everybody. I thought I would start off by asking you questions, and I think we prepped you just a little bit by letting you know we were going to ask you to address a few things, and hopefully you see that as an opportunity to share whatever it is you think is important to share. So why don't I just start by throwing this question out there. Tell us about your school experience, and maybe the first time around, tell us about things that you find to be the best or most rewarding parts of school.
Okay, I'll go first. I like to talk about the social aspect of school. I think I have more friends during school than I do over the summer, and I think it's good to connect with them through a work environment while we're under pressure of sports and school and find our people.
One thing I feel the school does very well is because we have such a small student body, and I think that the teachers, we can connect to them more and go to them for advice and help with anything. I feel like the teachers are definitely more they like to include us in things because we're such a small school.
I would also like to talk about the social aspect. Coming here, and everyone is really very welcoming, and in school, if you don't have all that many people that you can connect with, you sometimes feel lonely. So the social aspect is, and having friends in class and seeing your friends in the hallways is very rewarding.
Thanks. So again, I'll keep the ball rolling with questions, but eventually you won't need to necessarily answer my question. We can talk about what you want to talk about. But the next one is maybe the other side of that coin, in terms of going through school isn't always easy, and there are some challenges, and I imagine you may have experienced different challenges along the way. So what would you consider to be one of the more significant challenges that you face going through school?
You can go for it.
Like I said, with our school being so small, it's hard to focus on one activity. It's I know most of my peers, we really spread ourselves out pretty thin. We have a ton of activities that we are involved in, and it's very difficult to find a balance and also keep up with schoolwork because sometimes we get swamped at certain points, and it's very stressful.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, I'm doing so many clubs. I'm sure everybody is doing all these extra things, and it's hard to manage your time and get all your classwork done, go to bed on time, wake up early in the morning for school. It's just a lot.
Yeah. Also, there's the aspect of not being accepted by peers, even though it is a small school. These things are bound to happen. Depending on the way you dress or the way you would like to express yourself, there are bound to be a few people who don't agree with the way you dress. Well, not really agree, but don't like the way you dress or don't like the way you're expressing yourself, and you may experience some backlash because of that, which is difficult.
That's hard because our school is so small. If like a rumor gets out, everybody knows about it, and before long, like, everybody doesn't like you. So it's always hard to be close with everyone.
And it's hard to find a new group of friends to move on to because you don't really have many don't have many options.
A couple more things I'll ask you, okay, and then we'll open the door to other kinds of questions and other comments that you might have. In terms of the school community, you know, the teachers and the administration, we're always trying to come up with the best way to do things, but we don't always know what works. What do you think that we do particularly well here, like in terms of classes or teachers or activities or whatever it is? I realize it might overlap with some of the other things you've said, but what do you think we do particularly well? So it's good to know when we're doing things well, if we're doing things well.
I'm speaking as a senior.
Yeah.
I feel that the teachers and guidance counselor, and they do a very good job at helping us with college applications and like the senior year in general. It's very packed, and they understand and definitely having senior seminar is a blessing. I can get all my like college things done, and it's good for like setting us up like, for the future.
Teachers are also, you were saying that teachers are very welcoming. There have already been a few instances where I ran out of printering, and before the homeroom bell rang, teachers had their doors open, and I could go into a teacher's classroom to print out a paper that I needed to print for my first period in class. So just having that option where the teachers had their doors open to students before homeroom when everyone's getting into the building is phenomenal.
And I love 10th period too. That's so nice, especially when I don't have any study halls during the day. 10th period is a blessing because I can go talk to the teachers I need to talk to and get everything done before I go home.
And then the other side of that, what would you change? What would you change if you could? Or what would you suggest? Now you're talking to the Board of Education, right? The Board of Education, they're at the top of that. They're at the top of that chart over there, right? They're in charge, right? What would you want to see us change if you could make it happen?
I would like to address the cell phone policy. I know we were all going to get there at one point. The student body as a whole, we don't really like it. I think it's too restricting. I would like to see us at least be allowed to use our cell phones during study halls or in the hallways or even in the library, or when teachers give us permission to look something up quickly or take a picture of an assignment that we need.
Mm-hmm.
It's always very difficult to compensate for that.
Piggybacking on that, the punishment for getting caught with your phone, I feel is very harsh. Another thing I'd like to say is, I think something that would work, I don't know if you've tried to do this before, but if the teachers had like a calendar of like when they're having like tests or something, so that you're not assigned 5 tests on one day, and it's awful.
That is tough.
Yep.
It's like test after test, and by the end of the day,
Right.
like I'm so drained, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Once again, the cell phone policy, coming from a school, we were allowed to use our cell phones. Of course, there were limits. You couldn't use them when teachers were talking. You couldn't have headphones in. However, you are allowed to use them in study hall and in the library. And so coming here, and sometimes in study hall, I have a second period study hall, and sometimes I have absolutely no work to do. And on certain days, there are only like 6 people in the study hall, and I'm not allowed to use my phone. So sometimes I'm just sitting there doing nothing. And if I had my phone, I could at least be on Quizlet or Kahoot or Duolingo, because I have a lot of academic apps on my phone. So at least being able to have your phone in study hall.
We do understand that there are definitely students that abuse their cell phone privileges, but we don't think that it should be put on the whole student body.
All right, so I just asked you 4 questions and you had a whole lot to say, but you may have other things that you want to say too. So this is a good chance for you to share anything else that you'd want to share with the Board of Education.
Another thing I'd like to address is when school starts. I think it starts too early, and teenagers aren't getting enough sleep. I recently read an article that said like teenagers are getting 6 hours of sleep when they should be getting 8. And I think that's partly due to school starting at 7:30, and some people who live far away have to get up at 5 in the morning. And even pushing it back half an hour makes a big difference, I think.
And I've heard teachers also saying that it would be much better if the school started later, they could get their work done in the morning and be more prepared to teach.
And with the amounts of homework that students get, and all the extracurriculars students do, it makes it difficult to do the extracurriculars, go home, eat dinner, do all of the homework, and then go to sleep at a reasonable time so they can get enough sleep to wake up at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning.
But like when you have musical practice till 9 at night, you have to wake up at 6 in the morning, it's great.
When students are staying up past midnight to do work, it's really tough.
Yeah.
And I have a fixed period lunch, so I eat lunch at 10:30 in the morning,
Yeah.
which is a
That's
little crazy.
Yeah.
It's really weird. That's when I have breakfast in the summer.
Yeah.
That's when I eat breakfast.
And I think we should open it up so that board members have questions or comments. I think you should chime right in, so
I have a
feel free.
question. Lydia, dear, I know that you're in hockey quite a bit. How do you feel that some of the new mergers, what are you hearing from the other student athletes as far as some of the programs that have merged, like with Keene or Saranac Lake? What's the feedback that you're getting?
I think the merger with Saranac Lake was really great. At this point, we've all built relationships with the people from Saranac Lake, and we've all made new friends. I think it works.
Good.
Definitely. The only thing that's tough is traveling back and forth to schools. But like, what can you do about that if it's merged?
No, that's good to know. Thank you.
And we merged with Keene for softball, and it's really nice to have those like girls that can add their athletic abilities onto our teams, and they do really well, and it has been successful.
Oh, that's wonderful. Plus you get to meet students from other schools, which is
Okay.
great.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Thank you.
I just have a question. The board is considering whether to support or not support the concept of a armed resource officer. And I'm just curious as to, do you feel safe at school? Or would this, if we were to have, an armed police officer in school, would you feel less safe?
But it's never too, it's better safe than sorry. I don't believe that we are in present danger at the moment, but having somebody there to protect students would be nice.
Coming from another school in a much larger town, coming here from there, I feel a lot safer here than I did when I was there. However, having an armed person in school raises the possibility of the irresponsible students may try and mess with the police officer or do something stupid with the armed person on campus. However, having a trained official, like a police officer, I believe would be much safer as opposed to, weren't people talking about arming teachers? Which is a little crazy. Yeah.
I agree.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
You're all so poised and articulate, it's wonderful.
Do you have any questions for these guys? I wonder what they do. How many of you graduated from Lake Placid High School? There you go.
Probably more than you thought.
Has it changed a lot, since then?
It's a lot smaller.
Smaller?
Yeah, I had We had 80, 85 in my graduating class, and the classes were much larger then. So, yeah.
We actually, you speak of early, we were on split sessions, they called it, because the student body outgrew the school. So the 6th, 7th, 8th went from, we started school at 7 a.m.
Whoa.
You go earlier.
So count your blessings, ladies, you get to come in at 7:30.
Yeah.
And we had a football team, which I played football, and we practiced at 5:30, and then again, we practiced afterwards.
Wow.
But
Yeah, that's something I'm thankful for. I just I could
give you
not
a little
do that.
perspective.
Yeah.
Not just that.
And this was actually my 6th grade classroom,
Whoa.
so this very room. Want me to keep going? We had cars, buses.
Any questions from the audience?
I have one. So I graduated in '87 from Lake Placid and only had about 40 kids in the class, and we were a very low-key, relaxed class. And my daughter's class is high stress. She's constantly talking about all the pressure that she feels is put on them. What has changed that has caused the senior year to be so much more focused on AP classes and college? I just kind of feel like this year should have been a little bit more relaxed and excitement building for college, but we are really struggling this year because there's so much pressure on the seniors. What changed?
It's a great question, and it's a great conversation we could have. Probably you guys don't know any differently, and so you wouldn't know that things have changed, but things have changed. And you're right about that, and I think at times you think for the better, and at times, as you're pointing out, you think maybe not. And I think our kids experience both sides of that. They experience the opportunity to do different things and to try new things, like the spread too thin part. Is also the side of that is that you get to participate in all these things, but then there's the spread too thin, the pressure on you, and all that goes along with that. I think nationally, the drive for the broad drive, not locally directed here, but broadly for kids to be successful in terms of not just high school but also admission to college has raised the stakes and raised the bar. It used to be that kids could be admitted to certain schools and certain places with your Regents diploma, but the bar went up with AP courses and other advanced programs and the competition that went along with that. So you're absolutely right about that. Kids are experiencing things differently. And I think sometimes, and I think you're all a great example of this. I think sometimes we do kids a disservice because sometimes, broadly speaking, people still criticize teenagers, criticizing teenagers since the Greeks and the Romans, right? And they continue to do that. I think our teenagers today do more, accomplish more, push themselves more, and sometimes to their detriment than any time I can remember. And I think that you're to be applauded for that, but we also need to be sort of looking at that. What are we? What kinds of pressures are you facing, and how can we help with those so we're not contributing to the negative portion of that in any way that I guess we shouldn't be. So.
My classes, I think we've been conditioned to be extremely competitive.
Yeah.
All we talk about is class rank, who's got the best grades, all this stuff. And when you have if you would come into the senior lounge or the cafeteria where we're all sitting and you listen to our conversations, I guarantee not one of us is not talking about college or senior projects or anything like that. All we talk about is that and trying to get to college and trying to excel as much as we can right now. And it's very stressful keeping up with everybody.
Even for me, I've had this conversation with my parents, like, sports-wise, looking to play, like, hockey in college, the competition level has risen so high that you have to, like play hockey year round to even have a chance at college. Like my parents, they could go to prep school and pick any one of the 3 sports that they played and play in college. But now, you go to prep school, and on top of that you have to play club teams year round and train all day, every day to get to that level.
Yeah, that's true.
Students in my class have already started thinking about adding to their college applications. When talking about clubs, we have teachers tell us that if you join these clubs, they look good on a college application. There are a few people in the freshman office right now who did it because it looks good on a college application. So even as freshmen, we're already starting to think about and worry how to beef up our college resumes.
I remember coming home, I have a distinct memory of coming home from a field trip to Paul Smith in 8th grade and crying on the bus because I was thinking about how much, like, this is going to affect my life.
I have a question. Sorry, is it okay to?
Yeah, absolutely. And before you ask the question, I just want to introduce Shannon.
Yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit late.
That's okay. So Shannon Bentley's here, and you're a junior, I think president of the junior class, right? Recently elected, right?
I've been class president for 3 years.
3 years, okay, thanks, Shannon. All right. Go ahead, Mr. Preston.
So there's, you were talking about being accepted by your peers, and now we're talking about struggles of college and that type of thing. What about the students that are not college bound? Do you think like they're left out?
Yes, definitely. Our senior seminars are all focused towards getting into college and working in college applications, and I feel like the students who are going into jobs or the armed forces, they are seen as like less than those who are going into college, and there's a little bit of discrimination towards those students, and people kind of think that they're not as smart as those of us who are, but.
Do you have any suggestions, any of you, how we might address that? That's a tough question.
It's all opinion based.
Yeah.
Like, it's very hard to change a community's thought of people.
Opinions and assumptions.
Shannon, you may have come with ideas of things to say. Do you have anything that you had sort of prepared? I know you had gotten a couple of questions in advance, so.
Well, what I did, I talked to a few of my peers in my class, and there was a current issue that all of them mentioned was the phone policy. Yeah, I'm sure you guys already heard about it. Like, I am all for not in the classroom, because in the classroom it's all like strictly you have to pay attention, because if you miss that, then you won't like be as caught up as the other kids. But one thing that they all were like upset about is that in study halls and in the library we weren't allowed to use them. And some kids, they do use their phones for procrastination, I will admit, but others do use their electronics for education purposes. But I don't really have like a huge stance on it, but I know that they wanted me to talk about that today a little bit.
Ian, would you like to ask her your question?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to know, do you feel safe in school, and how would you feel about having an armed police officer specifically around to patrol school?
I do feel safe at this school.
Mm-hmm.
It would be a little concerning about an armed officer, but I think it could be necessary. And yeah. I'm not really. I think it could be necessary, but it'd be a little alarming towards students, because it kind of comes off as threatening if they see a police officer with a gun on his belt. If they're walking down the schools, they might think, others might think he's here to protect us, others might think like, oh, that's kind of threatening.
Like somebody did something wrong.
Yeah.
And that's why
And
it's
then,
here.
yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before we let them go home and, I don't know, whatever you're gonna do. your
Get some
homework.
sleep.
Yeah, go to bed.
want to say thank you so
Yeah,
much
thank
for
you so
being
much.
here.
Thank you.
Your comments
Thanks,
are heard, and I know that the school board will kick these around as the days and weeks go on. Really appreciate everything and the way you handle yourself in this situation. So thanks very much, and we're going to give you permission not just to be done presenting, but to leave the school board meeting, because sometimes people feel compelled to stay, but you are not compelled to stay. Okay? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, under reports, external audit, Tom Telling, CPA. Our external auditor, Tom Telling, he's from Telling Associates. We met with the audit committee just before tonight's meeting. Reviewed the findings of the annual audit, and he's now here to provide the entire board with similar information.
Thank you. You did this to me last year, too.
Yeah, you have to follow that.
Yeah.
Right there.
They were amazing, yeah, they were really good. So, I won't take a lot of your time. I'll just run through some of the key highlights of the audit, and thank you for having our firm do it. There are 3 letters, an audit report, a report on internal control, and then there's a separate letter that you have that is kind of how it went, our communication to the governing body, to the board. And then there's the financial statements themselves are in here. So I'm going to try not to drone on, but I'll tell you that the audit report is probably the most important piece, or an important piece, on page 1. And just to remind you, with the bold headings, that the financial statements are the responsibility of the management of the school district, and that you hire us as an independent third party to gather enough audit evidence to be able to give an opinion on the fairness of this audit report, that it reflects what happened during the year and what your balance sheet is as of the end of the year within the material range. So our opinion is a clean opinion that we're on board, that these are the results of the operations of the school districts for the year. So that's a good report. I will point out that this is, of course, our clipping pages. There's a separate report. This is kind of how it went, and we're required to communicate if we had any disagreements with management, and if we proposed any entries that we felt needed to be in the books and management didn't want to put in the books. This would be our opportunity to tell the oversight committee that there were disagreements. We didn't have any. There are, bring it to your attention, there are estimates that go into creating a financial statement. They're not just the number by number. And the most significant estimates that the district uses are one is the useful life of the building and equipment. Obviously, if you're depreciating something over a longer period of time, you're not bringing in as much expense. So we're in agreement with with those useful lives. The other is really large, and I'm going to touch on this in a minute. Is you hire actuaries to come up with. There are other post-employment benefits, which is the agreement that you have with your people. You're both retired and working here to provide health insurance is a key part of that. That's a big liability. The actuaries use assumptions. I'm going to just touch on that a little bit because you'll see that's in the current year there was a change in that it used to be you bring in those benefits over a 30-year period. So your liability went from somewhere around 22 million. It's an unfunded liability to about 50 million. I'll show you the numbers in here. Because the new GASB said that you needed to, they're no longer just going to bring it in, let's just like put it on. Why? It's a more meaningful number to have it out there. So I'll show you the effects of that. But there are clearly, actuaries have estimates that they use, discount rates and so forth, so that's another key one. And then you have your participation. There are two big trust funds. There's TRS and there's ERS, the teachers' retirement and the employees' retirement funds. These are separate, they're outside. You get your proportionate share of how those trust funds are doing. And here again, actuaries come up with all kinds of calculations as to is it overfunded or underfunded. As it happens now, the teacher retirement system is in theory overfunded, so you have a little asset that is there, and the employees' retirement system is underfunded, so you have your proportionate share of a liability that's founded. Okay, I'm probably taking too much time on that, but those are the key estimates that are in the report. And the third report is buried more in the back, and essentially it's after the financial statements themselves, and it's on page 55. This is another one you should be aware of. In this report, we are required to, if we come across any, it's called a significant deficiency or a material weakness in your system of internal control, we bring that to your attention. We did not find any that we felt were important enough to reach the requirements of material weakness. Like the lack of segregation of duties might be something that could be a material weakness. But we did, as you're totally aware of, if you turn the page, you have a compliance matter, and that's complying with the New York State law on your general fund balance cannot exceed 4% of next year's budget. And you and almost everybody else, or a lot of other school districts, do exceed that. So we bring that to your attention, and that finding is on page 57. You had a unassigned fund balance of 6.8% of next year's budget, which is about 541 over the 441,000 over that 4% threshold. A lot of numbers. I'm probably putting everything to sleep, but that's so. Those are the key reports that we give to you. I will take just a second to tell you how you did. You're probably totally aware, but it's kind of always helpful to have an accountant kind of run through some numbers with you. If you go to page 14. This is, you might think of this as an income statement. This is the state. School districts aren't income oriented, so it's called the statement of revenues and expenditures and the change. The school district brought in 19,323,000 of revenue. You drop down to a little over halfway your total expenditures. You can see what the categories: general support, instruction. Those. You have total assets, I'd stay with the total column again, of a little over $6 million, and most of that is in cash. There is another balance sheet I'll show you in a second, but it's on an accrual basis. Some of the cash is restricted, as you can see, 1.8 million. So you have 6.1 million of assets. You do have some liabilities. Most of it is due to the teachers' retirement fund and ERS, so 1.85 of liabilities leaves you a fund balance, like the second line from the bottom, of 4.2 million. A very interesting thing to look at least from an accountant's point of view, is to go to page 13, to go from that fund accounting balance sheet to what's called the statement of position. Under this scenario, you bring in long-term assets. Those are I'm in column 2. Under the assets, $12 million worth of the facility at its cost, less depreciation. And then you also bring in, if you go into these liabilities, I'm going to skip the deferred inflows and outflows for now, but you can see that you bring in 60 million. This is where the other post-employment benefit number comes in. You bring in 60 million of liabilities. Those are the bonds, notes, compensated absences, but they're all, you know, that, the 55 million is the big number, and that is the entire liability. So that what in essence that does is, makes the balance sheet look terrible, but, I don't know if that's an accounting term, I should not be so.
That's one we understand.
So there's that. And I might just leave it there. I can run you through some of the other post-employment benefits, but how the actuaries come up with their assumptions, but I don't know. If you want to just touch on that, I can do that. It's actually, you might want to be a little bit aware. It's on page 43. You gotta pull the plug on me. I will after this, and I'll just see if it's.
No, this is a good one, actually.
All right. So if you look at the top, this little chart, you can see that they have measurement dates. So these are the dates that the actuaries determine liability. So the July 1st, 2016, there's 60 million is where you were at the beginning. They tweaked it. They changed the assumptions, the discount rate. They raised it from 2.8 to 3.6. That actually helps you, you know, so that your total liability by the end of the year is the 55 million. So it went down. So they said, you know, discount rate. So actuaries can do that kind of thing. You can see right in there, you know, there's a change in assumptions at negative 8 million. That is primarily by using a different discount rate. If you look at the this little chart down below, you can see there's the 55 million is in the middle column. If the discount rate was to increase by just 1 point, the liability will go down to 47. If you increase it, if you decrease it, it'll go up to 66. I can tell you why that is, but I have to think about it. But present value concept. And so the other assumptions are they're on that little page before, the inflation rate, salary rate, healthcare cost rates. Those are the things the actuaries use. There's a whole report on this that they put together for you. So maybe I'll just sort of like slow down and see if anybody has any questions or any other direction you want me to go in.
Just a simple.
Yeah.
So the discount rate itself is a combination of a bunch of things, is basically what I'm hearing.
The discount rate is like an inflation rate. It's
Right.
like what you think, you know.
But it's made up of a lot of factors that
They
change all
have
the time.
They use a real rate. It's the discount rate is okay. On page 42, the second line up from the bottom, it says that the discount rate was based on a bond buyer's weekly 20. I didn't know what that is, but that's, you know, they do use a yeah.
Okay, so that's where they're coming up with this number.
Yeah.
And that just changes.
They can change their assumptions. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Because I mean, you know, $10 million one way or the other year to year is quite a bit of money.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's why they do that sort of like at 1% one way or the other. Yeah, to give you sort of a range.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I have a question on
Yeah.
page 57, when we were discussing the unassigned fund balance,
Yeah.
which we're currently at 6.8%. With that $500,000 and change, do we have to spend that, or say it's going somewhere in order to get down to the 4% where we're supposed to be?
You have, if you go to page 12, this is the balance sheet again, and go over to the general fund, that's the first column. Excuse me, you can see there are rules. New York State has rules as to what, if you restrict something for unemployment insurance, you can't just grab a number. Maybe somebody knows this better than I do, but I can show you in the footnotes. It'll describe in note 1 what the rules are for like unemployment reserve or tax cert or the EBLR. So those are reserves that you've created, the district, and then under the assigned has got more flexibility. They're kind of like the district has decided to appropriate, $520,000, you know, for the cover, that's for the next year. So, so you're already trying to drive that, the 4% is based on that unassigned one, that 1.3.
Right.
So,
And it's not in your report, but we do have a plan for that, and that is to spend that to pay off the BOCES capital project. First bill's coming due in January, so we are gonna be spending that down.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
So
Next year when
yeah.
you're here,
Yeah.
that percentage is gonna be lower.
Mhm. Did I answer
Yes.
kind of, sort of?
No,
Yeah,
No, I've
Roger.
forgotten, we had talked about that at the
Yeah.
previous
Uh-huh.
meeting,
Yeah.
so I was just curious.
No, it's a good question.
Any other questions?
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Tom has to drive back to Middlebury, correct?
Oh, no problem, no problem. I do this is, we go where the audits are, so. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dana.
Policy first reads. Tonight's first reads are 0110 sexual harassment, 1400 public complaints, 2340 notice of meetings, and 5405 student wellness. Any comments from the policy committee?
You know, I might wanna just
Sure.
just to start out, because we had this meeting on Thursday, and so there was no opportunity to provide you with any background.
Okay.
Would you like me to
Sure.
do that now, at least orally?
Please.
Okay, so Joan and Martha are both on this committee, and were able to participate in this meeting, Martha via phone conference, which was great, it worked out just fine. We also have community members, Patty Gallagher, Mary Warner, and Faber Smith. So we all did meet last Thursday to discuss these. There were these policies. Most of them, with the exception of student wellness, the recommendations were based on recent changes in law or regulation. So do you want me to go through those briefly? They are underlined in your documents.
No, it's clear.
Okay.
My only comment was,
Recommendation from NISBA, yeah.
all right, well, then fine. That's the only thing that jumped out at me, was like, that's kind of an interesting
Right.
choice of words.
The word had been victim, and it was
Yeah.
changed to target.
Okay, because you're not a victim until something happens, right? But it harms the individual as a person and negatively impacts the school culture. Okay, but that wasn't our words, that was.
It was not, we
that was
didn't come up
guidance.
with those, that was the recommendation.
That's fine, I'm good with that.
What does first read mean?
So, for every time we change policies, our procedure is that the policy committee deliberates and makes recommendations to the board. Policy committee is a board committee, right? And therefore, that committee makes the recommendation to the board. Then there's two levels. There's the first read, and then there's the final read before the board approves them, right? And so with the first read, it's an opportunity for the public to hear what policy changes are, plus other board members to hear, and to recommend changes. So if Jeff, for example, said, I really don't like Target, I want to see if we can't change that. What we could do is we'd have to go back and actually find out whether that was the law, and whether that was the word in the law,
Right, it's a
or
legal
whether
term,
it's,
right.
and I couldn't tell you that off the top of my head, whether it's from law or regulation, or whether it's NISBA's suggestion, but not, because that's usually how this works. It's
Sure.
either, because they basically provide us with the consulting expertise, and sometimes their recommendations are based on law and regulation, which, in this case, the broadening of who, to whom it applies, the requirement that there's training involved, that's all coming out of law and regulation. But I don't know the answer to whether or not that works.
Either way, I
Yeah.
thought
So it does give people,
kind of
it does
an
give
odd
the board an opportunity to say, how about we do this? And so even though the policy committee has seen it, the board can respond, and community members can also respond. And community members who are watching us on live stream could also weigh in and maybe, communicate with board member, board president, superintendent before second read, before approval. So it's an opportunity to be heard.
Thank you.
Can I go to the student wellness one? Because the student wellness policy recommendations are not based on any changes in law or regulation. The reason for the student wellness recommendations are, well, the reason why the policy committee took up the student wellness policy was because we did have some concerns based on recommendations from the board, which also came from some of our parents who were here at the last meeting, or in Wilmington at the last meeting, concerned about the way the recess policy was worded. So that allowed the policy committee to take up the entire student wellness policy. We actually made some additional changes, just the kinds of linguistic changes that the policy committee tends to make, trying not to, feeling comfortable with the way the language is. So there were some additional changes in there that aren't really substantive, but they just didn't want to make some of these grand statements that could be questioned. They really wanted to keep the policy a little more restricted and limited in its language. But as far as, I'm going to go right to the recess, right? The policy committee did read the recess language and recommends this change. And it's essentially the elimination of 2 words the most. So the policy, the line says, recess will be held outdoors whenever possible and indoors during the most inclement weather at the discretion of the building principal. The policy committee recommends striking out the most. And we had a discussion about this. We had a discussion of whether or not to broaden it even more. And the committee felt that the use of the term weather was important, that the use of the term weather recognized that there is sometimes pressure to avoid going outside in any kind of weather, and the committee didn't really want to go there. What they wanted to do, though, is to provide the principal with more flexibility, so that so the principals don't feel compelled to call for 100% participation in recess outdoor, even in a heavy rainstorm that doesn't happen to be, say, thunder and lightning, right, which is kind of where the line was being drawn. So this change, the committee felt made the kind of provided the flexibility that I think our principals were asking for, and we think our parents were asking for also. So the committee was pretty comfortable with just that minimal change in order to provide that extra flexibility, and they thought that could address both the concerns that the parents are bringing up, but also the worry that it could be a slippery slope, and that recess would almost never go outside if it was cold. That's an exaggeration, but they wanted to make sure that didn't happen either.
So that's the only change, is just those 2 words taken?
No, there were some additional changes.
Yeah,
If you
yeah.
go there, you would see, and I think it's okay to take a look, because I don't know that I explained it all that well. But if you go to the student wellness policy, so the first change is to strike out, given the documented connection between proper nutrition, adequate physical activity, and educational success,
Right.
and go right to the Board of Education. Again, the committee tends to operate looking at some of the language and saying, okay, isn't it possible somebody might document some other research? There's a lot of research out there, and then challenge us on the documented connection. They didn't have a full grasp of what that documented connection is. They just didn't like the use of that strong language, so opted to strike that out. There's also in the middle of in section 1, the board recognizes that nutritious, well-balanced, reasonably portioned diet is essential for student wellness. That stays. And then to help students possess the knowledge and skills necessary to make nutritious food choices for a lifetime, the district shall ensure that all foods and beverages available in school promote good nutrition, balance, and reasonable portion size. Again, the policy committee likes to sort of doesn't like to go to the extreme language. Ensure is like a 100% guarantee, and the policy committee really recognizes this is an educational institution, that we're educating kids. Those are I think we use the term aspirational goals, but we didn't want to put that in there or keep that in there in a way that, in which, the board could be challenged if 100% success rate wasn't met. The policy committee doesn't want to handcuff the board in these ways. I think am I articulating that close to how our conversation went? And I think that might have been it.
So my question then kind of dovetails on that.
Yeah.
So it's under the school meals and the the rectangle there.
Yeah.
Number 5, make free drinking water available at locations where meals are served. How do we do that? Drinking fountain.
Well, there is a drinking fountain available, and there, we do have the more contemporary ones where we have I'm asking.
Well, the
you
one
because I
that
know you're-
fills water,
Yeah, the
water
water
bottles, yeah,
fillers,
that's the one
okay.
down here.
But do we provide the bottles, containers, all that stuff? I guess my question, somebody asked me,
Good
are we
question.
selling water in the cafeteria?
We do sell water
sell
in
water.
cafeteria as well as,
Right, we sell water in bottles.
yes.
Right,
But we also make it available not in bottles.
right. So I guess the question was,
Yeah.
how easy is it if you don't have a bottle to get water for lunch? And that's not my question, somebody asked me, and I said, I don't know, but I will ask.
Well, there's a water fountain right,
See, but a drinking fountain.
drinking
Yeah,
fountain.
Yeah, but you don't have
correct.
they can't go get a glass and fill it.
Sure,
sit
they
down.
can walk to the library or main office, because we have
No, I'm
those.
talking about like in the cafeteria though. They're sitting down for lunch. Do they have to buy a bottle of water, or can they go and fill up a glass of water for free?
Yeah, because the water fountain is right there,
Okay,
yes.
So, but there's no container right there.
No.
So the
right.
containers are elsewhere, but they're accessible. They're just,
Yeah,
but you're
okay.
right, they're not right there, like with a cup pulling out.
Like in the library, we have a bubbler
Yeah.
and they can
Yeah.
pull,
Yeah.
you know, a
Yeah.
paper cup out and get
Okay.
water.
So there is, yeah.
I guess the thing was like, so my kid's buying bottled water and there's a fountain right there.
Right.
But
Mhm.
why am I spending $2 on a bottle, or whatever it is, $1.20 for a bottle of water?
Mhm.
And over the last couple of years, various organizations have given out water bottles.
Right.
And CYC has done
Sure.
it on several occasions.
Yeah.
College for Every Students, have given them. We've had some in the main office available. Kids have walked in and more, ready to
Yeah,
give them
I
a
think
water
the question
bottle.
was, that, like, the kids are in the lunch line, it's like, oh, I need something to drink, and I'm gonna buy, there's water right there, but I don't have anything to put it in, so I'm gonna pay $1 for the
Right.
bottled water versus,
Right. So your point, and I think the point of the people who are raising this
Yeah.
with you, is not that this statement is not a welcome in the policy,
No,
it's how we're carrying it out.
exactly,
Okay,
right.
so we need to look into how we're carrying it out and get back to you on that.
Okay, that's fine, thanks.
The girls did mention when they were here about the early lunchtime that they have at 10:30 in the morning, which isn't anything new.
It
This
is not
something.
new, no.
But it does say in here, under meal scheduling,
Right,
number
yeah.
2, schedule lunchtime between normal lunch hours. So 10:30 in the morning, most of us wouldn't
No.
define that as a normal lunchtime. But again, it's nothing new. I mean, it must be a difficult thing to try to schedule, but I don't know. It's in the policy that it's supposed to be scheduled during normal lunch hours.
Yes. That's a good point.
So I don't think
Yeah.
there's
Would
much
you like
you
that
can
looked
do with
at?
that, but, I'm sorry.
Would you like to send that back to clarify that? I mean, I don't want to support a policy that we're already not following.
Well, it's just not a thing. I don't really know much what we can actually do with it, should it even be in there. I mean, we're stating something that a 10:30 a.m. lunchtime really isn't a normal lunch hour, and we're putting something in there, making it look like we're adhering to it when we're
Sure.
really not.
Yeah.
So does that bring it back to the committee?
Well, it doesn't have to, it could. The board could recommend that the committee, revisit, or the board could recommend changes on its own. The committee is a board committee, which means that it's really just doing the detail work that the board is charged with doing. So, for example, the board could suggest, instead of the word shall up above, right, so it says school meals, the district shall, right? Am I-
Or
am I right? No, I'm
strives
sorry.
to, or
Meal
hopes to.
scheduling, the district shall, and we do this a lot in the policy committee too, we revisit those words. And, so one way to go is to change the word shall to, should strive to. Another way is to say that's what the policy says, and, schools should make it happen. And so, and I would tell you, you're right, that there's a reason why it is there, and that we've had challenges
No, I
trying to
know.
make all the other pieces of the puzzle fit. But the board could, so the board could recommend that, and, again, approve it based on that. And that's why we do first reads, because it's an opportunity for the board to weigh in.
Comments on that? Colleen, would you like to change the language? suggest
I'm just
changing
thinking
language?
if a parent or a student reads this and they come back and they look at under school
Yeah.
meals, scheduling number 2, they're going to say, okay, you're telling us you're doing this and we're not. So maybe just changing the verbiage to, instead of the district shall, the district, I don't know.
Shall strive to.
Shall
Right.
strive
Yeah.
to, or,
I agree with that. Any other comments, Anna?
That solves it.
So if you're okay with that as a full board, we can make that change for second read.
Sure. I think that just-
yeah.
One question for the committee. Under number 3, staff members who provide nutritional promotion and education shall be appropriately certified and trained. That's been eliminated. Is there a, is
Yes.
that a NISBA?
Yeah, we had a long
recommendation?
discussion about that. Do either of you want to weigh in on that?
The reason why we decided to take that out was, most of this is discussed like in health class. And they are certified. But we realize that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we realize that there's other staff members who do promote, talking to a kid about, hey, you shouldn't drink this, you should maybe, little comments are made, and they're not certified or trained. But yet, they do try to provide, they try to promote nutrition. So we decided to take that out because our staff members who do it as their job are certified.
Right.
Certified teachers, so we just felt that it was a wasted sentence, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think the term certified in a school, when there's so many different kinds of certification, is
Well,
so
like
broad.
the
it's hard
cook,
to- Right.
he's not certified or trained.
Right. So our food service director, who's our wellness coordinator,
Right.
is not a certified teacher.
Right, so therefore we felt that.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an open term, and it's certified by who? and
Exactly.
For what?
Yeah.
So,
Right.
yeah. So, okay, yeah, no problem with that.
Thank you. Anything else? Any further explanation on these?
No, I didn't go into great detail on the other ones, but I think they're pretty self-explanatory based on the documents.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I guess I would just bring up the, we had every single president of each class tell us that the cell phone policy needs to be. So are we looking at that cell phone policy, or?
So there's a difference between policy and the way we carry it out in the schools, right? So our policy, we're not looking at. We do have policies on bring your own device. The point that the students are raising is the way we have different rules in every school, elementary, middle, and high, for how kids are allowed to utilize or not their devices. And they did change this year. And a lot of that was based on, we didn't really have this, would actually maybe have been a valuable discussion to have. A lot of this was based on some of the studies and reports that we were investigating last year as a school district, which had a lot to do with the harms and dangers behind things like screen time and social media and all that. That was part of kids' learning experience too. We had a film screening. Do you remember the name of the film? Angst.
Yep.
Which showed sort of the mental health, the risks towards mental health of the massive use of devices amongst all people, including teenagers. So a lot of this came from a lot of those conversations. It wasn't sort of an overnight, let's just get tough on cell phones. It was a way to alter, the way our kids were, make an attempt to alter the way our kids were using their devices. So I think it's a good conversation to have. I think the board's job is policy and the school's job is carrying it out. And I think that it would be really important to have school people assess how things are going and make some decisions based on that, including conversations with kids like these.
But it did change quite dramatically from last year to this year. And, I mean, clear, and, you know, everybody's pointing it out.
It was especially different in the middle school.
Mhm.
And then there were some significant changes in high school, I think the kids pointed some
Sure.
of those out. But I would think even the middle school is even more significant.
Yeah, they gotta keep theirs in their locker
Yeah.
Yeah,
all day.
I think it would be a tough thing, just my own viewpoint, to make that decision when I would probably defer to the teachers and those that are working in the classrooms and they're actually seeing what the students are doing, and the difficulty that they're having. And I don't think it's, you know, any kind of a hidden secret, the amount of screen time that the kids are getting on a regular basis. And if they can't have it for a study hall once a day or a library period, is that really detrimental? And I still kind of feel strongly that there's probably 75% of the kids that are still sitting there and they're on Facebook and Instagram and various other things. And I don't know, I would just really defer to the teachers and the buildings and the
Yeah,
principals.
I mean, there was, like I said, there was some good reasoning behind some of the changes, and I think it's a good idea for us to reassess changes, you know, like how did it go? Did it go well? Should we throw the whole thing out? Should we go more so, or should we make some changes that are, you know, and yet keep sort of the general gist of what we're trying to accomplish? And it's still pretty new, it's about 6 weeks in. I don't know, maybe that's enough time, maybe it's not, to take a look at it. I guess I agree that I'd like to get lots of voices in, and then kind of, you know, again, we've changed this a little. This isn't the first time we've changed the question about devices in school, and it won't be the last either, so.
Well, to Colleen's point, the guideline still gives the teacher discretion in a non-academic class, the library, study halls.
Right.
So
the study hall is potentially available and in the library. Right.
Correct, that's up to the individual teacher to decide, and sounds like, at least when I left, the library, for the most parts, was saying no to the use of phones. However, there were students that were allowed on period by period basis, so it was, again, the discretion of the teacher, to kind of weigh the use of it. It's interesting, because obviously I was part of, the change in the guidelines. There was a study that came out around this time that really caught my eye, where it was done at a college level, but they said it's kind of applies to the high school level as well. They took 2 classes. One class, kids were allowed to have their devices to use in class. One class, they were not able to use them. And they found that the kids in the class that had access to devices scored a letter grade lower in exams and their overall than the class that did not. Even to the point that even in the class where they were allowed to, kids that did not have, students that did not have phones in that, even scored lower because of the distraction. So when you see reports like that and you have that conversation, and the students make great points, and that's where, again, looking at the guidelines, it was really focused on the academics of it, and the social aspects. The documentary that we showed, Angst, talks about the higher level of anxiety that kids have, partially because of being so connected to that device that they're always wondering what's happening on social media and wanting to check it and all that.
Okay, if we can move on here. Just to that end, it's a great discussion, but we only have policy control that we pointed out. So if we do question something like that, let's go back, look at the policy, see if there's something in there that needs tweaking.
And if you want to have a planned discussion on the topic, we could set that up for the future.
Yeah, definitely. Treasurer's report.
More
Mr.
numbers.
Wood. Yeah, can you keep it brief?
Absolutely. You've gotten this ahead of time. My first one, I think I got to Karen a week and a half in advance. I was so anxious to get these things to her. But as you can see with the treasury report for the month of September, in terms of our previous balance, sitting a little over $3.5 million. Our total receipts pushing close to $8 million. Really, if you highlight and you go down to the bottom, ending cash balance of a little over $11 million. Obviously, September is a busy month in terms of collecting taxes. And we'll talk about what we brought in over the month of September in a little bit. But from this, basically, you can see that the books are balanced through September 30th in terms of what we brought in. Outstanding checks still about $665,000. So total available balance as of September 30th is a little over $11 million in there.
Great. Budget status?
Budget status. So you'll see our revenue has ticked up since the last time we sat here about a month ago. At that time, our year-to-date revenue was very low because of we hadn't started really collecting. But you can see that we collected about 98% of our property tax, a little over $15 million, a little better than last year, which was at 97.91%. Year-to-date revenue, you'll see some changes there as well. Charges for services budgeted $26,000. We brought in today $34,000. The one that really stands out is the miscellaneous. You'll see that year-to-date revenue of $198,000. We budgeted a little over $98,000 there. That is largely in part from getting our money back from BOCES. That is what that comes out. Basically, excess coming in during the month of September. That's really why that changes there for the most part. We haven't received much of our state aid yet, but that won't really start happening for another couple of months. On the expenditure side, school's back in session, so you've seen an uptick there in terms of salaries. $1.5 million so far in terms of salaries, 1.3 in terms of employee benefits. So we're looking at that. And you can see that that's a little higher from last year, 13% to 17% in terms of salaries paid out at this point in time. Most of the other things are still pretty low, given the fact that we're just about 6 weeks into the school year. Spent $3.5 million out of our $19 million budget. But just about a little less than a percentage point above where we were last year for expenses. So when you're looking at this, I think we're standing pretty good in terms of what we brought in, and our spending is basically on from previous years.
Any questions? I have one. How are things going?
Good.
Good.
Absolutely. Betsy and I were, I was just saying earlier today, it's the day goes by fast. Yeah, they can go by fast.
Great. Moving on to information for the board, there are several items. The cross-country trip to Long Island, the cross-country trip to Orlando, SATs, PSATs, the extracurricular activity summary, and in follow-up to our discussion at the October 3rd meeting, a copy of a letter sent to parents from Principal Sonia Franklin.
That letter, by the way, was distributed before the board meeting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it wasn't in response to the board meeting, it was in response to the
But
concerns
in
that
response to our.
happened to be shared at the board meeting as well.
And down in executive content is proposed security camera regulation. Again, we at the board level establish policies, and then it's up to the administration on several of these policies to develop regulations. And this regulation is in response to policy 8210, use of surveillance cameras on school property. You want to add any comments?
No, we did look at some other school districts and what their practices are, and we were, kind of interested in what standard operating procedure might be, and we thought that this general outline worked for how we see ourselves going forward. We still, kind of raised some questions about, access and the specific points of access and we're pretty new to the cameras. We're still only a couple of months in. And so we're aware that we might want to tweak some of these as we go. But, you know, we've had a lot of conversations. Jeff's been involved on the Building and Grounds Committee. Leah's been involved on, you know, with some questions about our cameras. We've been addressing some of those, by the way. We've been trying to work on some of the technical issues. You know, Dana's been involved in that as well. We've had our friends from, who's our contractor? Lindstar here, tweaking some things. But, you know, right now, you know, we're pretty comfortable with the way this lays out, how we anticipate utilizing the cameras. And if you go to the school buildings, you'll see that we've already put out some signs. We have used them we've used the cameras a number of times, very much in agreement with the way things are outlined here, which is, you know, generally it's in response to something that we then want to verify by looking at the film. So I think this reflects reality pretty well.
Good.
One question under 5 is law enforcement officials granted access to video recordings. Are they also granted permission to view it real time as well? I know that was one of Chief Moore's requests. I don't know if.
So the idea of live, right? Again, some of these are situational, right? So we do want law enforcement to have access to live camera activity if it's needed.
Correct.
Right? And otherwise, it should follow the recordings. And we've had those conversations in our safety meetings as well.
Great, thanks. Any questions, comments? All right, moving on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, we're going to start with a little presentation. How about you hand out certificates and I'll read the proclamation. So I'm going to read a proclamation that we posted for you, and Karen is going to hand out some certificates. And here's the proclamation. Whereas each year School Board Recognition Week is observed by more than 700 school boards and school districts throughout the Empire State. And whereas our state's public education system is designed to meet the educational needs of all children and to empower them to become competent, productive contributors to society in an ever-changing world. And whereas members of local school boards are dedicated to children learning and community and devote many hours of service to elementary and secondary public education as they continually strive for improvement, excellence, and progress in education, recognizing that all children can be successful learners, especially when education is tailored to the individual needs of the child. And whereas local school board members are strong advocates for public education and are responsible for communicating the needs of the school district to the public and the public's expectation to the district by working closely with parents, educational professionals, and other community members to create the educational vision we all hold for today's students and those in the future. And whereas the members of New York State local school boards respond to the educational needs of the communities they serve and help ensure the solid foundation of our school system. In doing so, these leaders help strengthen our state's educational system and improve future prospects for our children. And whereas during October 22nd, 26th, that's next week, special activities and programs will be held in communities across New York State in observance of School Board Recognition Week. And it is fitting to join in acknowledging the commitment and contribution of members of local school boards. Now, therefore, I, Andrew M. Cuomo, Governor of the State of New York, do hereby proclaim October 22nd, 26th, 2018 as School Board Recognition Week in the Empire State. And that, statewide, it reflects what we see here locally, which is that you make those contributions and those commitments to public education. You do it here by coming to our meetings every other week, or maybe sitting on committees and additional moments of your free time. But you also do it when you're listening to people, when you're sharing views and ideas with people in the community. And I think really just by being the kind of person who cares about public education, which means so much to so many. Yes, our kids and yes, our parents, but even more broadly, public education makes a difference in what kind of a democracy we are and want to be. And you are the representatives of that kind of democracy in this community. So you're not just valued statewide, you're valued right here by us and by the students who come and who they represent, and by those of us who work for the district and for you. So thank you very much for all you do.
Thank you.
We're going to Disney World next week.
That's right.
We're going to Disney World.
You are going to Disney World. So I also just want to share with you other upcoming events and activities district-wide. Just again, to give you a flavor for what's going on out there while we're in here. So we are coming to the end of the fall sports season. Sectional playoffs begin soon in a number of sports. Tomorrow in boys soccer in particular. Last week we honored senior soccer players. Today was senior cross-country runners, and next Thursday we honored senior volleyball players with the senior game, right? So the senior game is an opportunity to celebrate our senior student athletes as they complete each athletic season. So I just want to say congratulations to our senior student athletes and their families for all they contribute to the Blue Bomber athletic traditions, and wish them all good luck in sectionals in the days and weeks to come. So coming to the end of the fall sports season. Other things, tomorrow evening we welcome back our 8th graders and their teachers and chaperones from Washington D.C. The field trip, from what I've heard, is going very well, and we look forward to seeing them back here and hearing their stories. They've been gone since Sunday morning, early Sunday morning. In the next week, we also have field trips throughout the district, in particular kindergarten, 4th grade. Now Friday is our annual Fall Superintendent's Conference Day, and that means that all staff and faculty will be here engaged in professional development activities while students are off for the day. Highlights for Friday include some all-staff, combined collaborative activities, as well as some grade level or departmental level collaborative curriculum development, which is specific for each different group. And then we are going to be doing some school safety training and utilizing the ALICE enhanced lockdown approach. And people who are involved in our safety discussions are aware of what that means, but it is a different approach to school lockdowns, widely accepted, widely recommended, and we'll be putting some of those pieces into play here. This opportunity is a chance for many others in the district to learn about how that works.
Which including us, because we
Yes,
asked.
yes, and why don't you bring that up while you're at it?
So there's an online training for Alice, and we asked if the board be allowed to, we have access as well. So if you want to take the course and learn what the faculty and staff are learning and implementing, it's available. And I think.
Yeah, we certainly have purchased enough.
Yeah, you said
online access.
Sure.
Yeah. So if you are interested, please let me know.
Yeah.
Other things, just a lot of things going on. Next week there's a blood drive sponsored by the Key Club. That's Tuesday. There's also a financial aid presentation that's sponsored by our high school counseling office, and that's Wednesday, 6:30 p.m. There's also on Thursday the Middle School All-County Music Festival, and that's where our middle school musicians travel to Elizabethtown to participate with other schools musicians in a big concert. That's next Thursday. Next Saturday there's a haunted house sponsored by the sophomore class. 2 different versions, one for younger kids and one a little scarier for older kids. Of course, if you like Halloween, don't miss the Halloween parade on Halloween Day down Main Street, and that's where all of our elementary students and our band parade downtown. Looking ahead, we also have our fall play is coming up, and the high school fall play is first weekend in November, I believe.
Yes.
And it is You Can't Take It With You, and that's a play by George Kaufman and Moss Hart. Maybe some of you remember. It's an old one and a goodie, and it's directed by Brendan Gotham here, and participating 20 student actors. the fall play. So keep your eyes open for that one. And then, of course, I don't want to finish without mentioning that we do have a few members of the board and me. We will be traveling to New York City to participate in the NISPA conference. So that should be exciting, and hopefully we get a chance to share some of what we learned back here with you at our next meeting. And that's everything.
Thank you. Lincoln goals with agenda items.
Do we first and foremost with the presentation that they came
And also education, same for 3A.
What did you say, John?
Well, education, students first and foremost, and also education, which is the second goal.
Add the SAT programs under education as well.
Sure. I guess you could sort of have a standing, treasurer and budget status report as finance, if you want to. Yeah.
And the safety committee meeting under goal 4, leadership. Sort of a standing. Anything, anybody else have?
We have the security cameras with possibly technology, I don't know that.
What goal would that?
I think under technology, maybe?
It's number
It was
Five.
information for the
5.
board.
5, yeah.
Okay, great. All right, here we go.
Moving on.
Discussion, school resource officer. This is sort of a continuation of our discussion that we started October 3rd meeting in Wilmington. We did have the contribution of one Wilmington resident. But down in the executive content, the SRO update was sort of what I took away from the conversation. Hopefully it is a true reflection. Basically what I did was strike out option 1, which was the total support of the county sheriff's plan. I think there was consensus that we would sort of want some control over what sort of officer was in here, how they presented and that type of thing, rather than just giving carte blanche to the department. So, and at the urging of several people, there was an option 5 put in, which is support the concept of hiring a school resource officer in the Lake Placid Central School District. This would include the sheriff's plan for the use of county funding and the sheriff's deputies. However, only if specific details are agreed upon. Without such an agreement, or if additional resources are desired, such as more than 20 hours, support a district funding plan to hire an SRO with the specific details to be determined. Karen also included, there was a poll in the Adirondack Daily Enterprise. Would you support putting resource officers in schools? And 57.97% were yes, and 35.14% were no, and 6.88% were undecided. Discussion.
Well, I'm glad that we get some community input through at least the students here. And I thought it was interesting that they overwhelmingly felt that they were, I guess my read was that they felt safe. And so that was good. I'm glad that I didn't hear from any of them that they didn't. But that they were, some of them seemed, I guess they were sort of dealing with some of the same issues that we were, that there could be a need for it. Yeah, I forget who it was, he was in 10th grade. Shannon, I believe, that said that, they would feel that somebody did something wrong if there was an officer. Lydia. And so, it's why I think it's difficult that with this for me, it seems like it's option 2, I think in concept, I think I would like to see a resource officer here, but, you know, the details would have to be really worked out. For example, I would see does he have to be in full tactical gear while he's in here? And I think that was sort of reflected in some of the concerns of the students, that they would feel that they did something wrong, or they would put them on edge. And so I would really want to know, you know, specifically what he would be wearing and how he'd be presenting himself as a resource officer.
Well, there was one of the students, I think it was the new 9th grader, who had concerns whether or not a student would have access to the armed individual who was sitting in the room and turned his back for a minute while, you know, the student came up behind him. I think that was brought up, you know, the concern. You never know. I mean, it's certainly happened in law enforcement before, when a criminal or whatever is able to get the gun away or whatever. So I think that was a concern that some of the students had too.
I don't feel that we should be taking this on as a district. So I just see option 5. I guess not really being an option, because I just wouldn't want, would make me feel, you know, I would be concerned about the liability. I would be concerned about, I guess specifically liability.
And that's a common argument now in the literature. What is our liability once this is taken on? And it depends upon which side you want to position yourself. So, yeah, I mean, personally, I agree with what was said last week, and that is we're trying to keep guns out of the school and not bring them in. Concealing a weapon is a little different. I think a resource officer should be that, a resource officer, not a police officer or a deputy sheriff. And that is exchanging with students thoughts, ideas, confiding in them, and the students confiding in the officer. And I would find that hard to believe that would happen with a full turnout gear individual and an exposed pistol and so on and so forth. But
Yeah, I guess you really want to look at what's the goal, what's the purpose of the resource officer? Is it to be an armed presence in the school? If that's the only goal, and I see no point. But if it's to, you know, protect and, you know, and defend the property at every level, and that includes our security system and our perimeter, and using the counselors as you know, preemptive, I don't know what we're going to call it. I think it's bigger than what we're talking about. It's a bigger job, and I'd be really reluctant to go forward with something. It's not well thought out, in my opinion, at this point. So.
And I think we talked about this before, that if we're doing it for the reason of creating perception to the community, I don't think that justifies us embarking on this if it's just to create some perception that we're extra safe when I don't particularly, I don't know. If we're just doing it for, I just don't agree with that, if we're just doing it just to create this perception that we're, whatever.
It's a really tough decision, because you can say, all right, if we don't do it and something bad happens, then it's like they did nothing. Or if you do it and something bad happens or goes wrong for another reason, why do we do that in the first place? So no matter how you look at it, it's between a rock and a hard place type decision.
Yeah.
Were we going to ask the community, were we setting time aside or inviting parents to come or something? Had we talked?
We did. It's the last Wilmington meeting.
Oh, that was it.
Yes.
Okay.
So the best feedback we have right now is the poll from the enterprise.
Correct.
Yeah,
and then
which was out there, 2 days, I think.
Student input and
Right.
Which isn't just limited to our district either. It's obviously.
And they're also not scientific.
No, it's just whoever wants to get on and push a button.
Nothing personal.
It's not your fault.
Yeah, think of it. Exactly that, yeah.
So I guess the decision is, do we want to support school resource officer at all? Or do we just, that would be the discussion, you know, that.
I think you have
First
to define what it is. What is it we're trying to achieve by accepting this position or creating this position or allowing this position to come into the school via the county? What is it we want to accomplish here? And we haven't done that. I think we have to do that. And then I think it's not just a board decision, I think it's a community decision.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
You know, what is it we're trying to accomplish? Yeah, safety, and that's certainly one of our top priorities as a board.
And in polling, this small sampling of individuals that I've come in contact with, the first response is, why, what's wrong? And I think as the four sitting here, they feel safe. Are they a good representation of the student population? I would say so.
Well, the other thing too, and I think Roger said, it's not a scientific poll, the one that was done by the enterprise, and 6.8% were undecided. And I said to my wife, who takes a poll and then doesn't come to a conclusion? Who does that? She said, people with nothing better to do. So clearly, there, you know, it's like a lot of things. You know, people who do that have an opinion, but it's not a scientific opinion. Doesn't represent the whole community. So, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a really hard decision. Or I don't even know if there is a decision yet.
I don't think of consensus.
So what do we do?
Good question.
I think it's worth continuing to talk about.
So I think continuing to talk about it, maybe do come up with some sort of survey. The problem with a survey is you come up with the same results. And the problem with a survey is, are you truly assessing a student resource officer? Because I think if you ask the majority of individual what is an SRO, they couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
It's a police officer. So I think there needs to be an educational component as well, so.
I mean, do our students need that, or do they need someone else? I know we have school counselors, but do they need someone else more in that role, that someone that is available for students to go to with issues other than looking for college placements or something? Is that something that we should be looking at versus having an armed person in the building? Maybe, is it something that we should have something with more of a person that acts in that role, as a whether it be a confidant or someone that the students can go to? I don't know. I don't know already what the current role of our counselors and things are in the building, and maybe that's more of what we need, is that go-to person that we've all talked about when we grew up here, whether it be the janitor in the hallway or someone that we all went to who knew the heartbeat of the school and knew what was going on. And maybe that's what our district needs more than, I don't know, that's just what I'm.
Certainly what some of the resources that I read coming out of the academic community recommend is that, putting your resources more into the counseling side of things.
Sure.
Rather than the law enforcement side of things. But, that being said, it does sound to me that, correct me if I'm wrong, that the board is making a decision to reject an armed uniformed officer.
I hate to be the one to say it.
It does sound to me that the board would not support that, at least not at this point in time. It's not clear to me if the board would support kind of what you're pointing out, Liam, and I think what you're also talking about, Greg, which is a school resource officer that maybe wasn't armed or wasn't uniformed, whether or not they were armed, obviously, or
Concealed.
Concealed, yes, that's the word. So, it may be that, the conversation is more along those lines, that we, that maybe identify, what kind of school resource officer we're really discussing here in terms of that, and then maybe the board wants to decide whether or not that, and if the armed officer is out, then then defining what that is, and then deciding whether or not the board wants to support that now, or putting on hold, I think, is also a reasonable decision.
I think the only urgency, if there was an urgency to it, is some sort of support for the sheriff's plan to the
That's what kind of brought this to the forefront.
It did.
It did,
right.
and so otherwise we probably would be having this conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I don't think
So I think that's been a decision that's been made, that we wouldn't support the plan as it was presented to us, which would be
I
a
guess
uniform,
I agree with
armed,
that.
individual in the schools.
And the other thing, I think I brought this to Roger's attention, was that I think it was reported in the papers that, you know, we did support that. And I think,
Yeah, I was wondering where that was, I saw that.
and we
I
did,
remember
I
seeing
mean,
that.
but they basically, they didn't say we supported it, they said we did not support it. It was like, all but 2 schools don't support it, and we weren't one of those 2 schools. And I was like, wait a minute, we didn't actually.
Right, that wasn't accurate.
No. So, yeah, I think if it weren't for that, we probably, again, this would not be as urgent a topic as it is right now.
So basically, we take no action.
I would say, yeah. I mean, I don't think we should stop talking about it.
Oh,
but,
absolutely
yeah.
not. That's the way it came up, was
Right.
let's talk about this because.
'Cause
They
it's
were
not-
looking for probably a November 6th,
Oh, sure,
decision prior to November 6th, I'm
Right.
sure.
I'm
And
not
that's
sure
the
when the
work.
supervisors were making their,
25th, I think, of October,
that?
right?
Okay.
I believe that's the meeting.
so.
And from what I've heard, there's been no, some of them weren't even aware of it, until now, until it was in the press. But, yeah. Okay.
So anybody have any other discussion?
Well, I mean, I guess there is, yeah, I guess I would agree that there is consensus that we reject option 1. We're not gonna blanket support the sheriff's plan
Correct.
as he presented it. Because we have a lot of questions, at least I do. But the idea that we're don't have to pay for it makes it more appealing. I'll just come out and say it, you know?
Oh, it does. But
Yeah.
But
if
then you
it's,
set a precedent that
Yeah,
once you
right.
bring this person in, I think you're somewhat committed to it, because then once he's gone after the 20, you know, whatever it is, the funding of the 20 hours a week, people are going to expect it. Whether, I just think, my own, you bring him in for 20 hours a week for a year, you better be prepared to have it in the budget the following year.
so just to go down through these, I agree, number 2 is, I don't think is a option. Number 3, reject the plan, but support district funding. I don't believe that's an option at this point either. Based on what Jeff said is, you know, we don't know what our concept of that. Yeah, so, and rejecting the concept, option 4, no, we are not rejecting the concept of a school resource officer. I think that needs to be bolded. We're not rejecting
We're not
that.
rejecting it.
We're rejecting what has been presented before us at this point.
And defining it.
Right, so therefore that knocks out option 5 because that's a combination of 2 others. So that leaves us with no decision, but further discussion.
And it's an odd title too, school resource. I mean, when you hear that, it doesn't really evoke a feeling that it's supposed to be someone with a gun on them. It doesn't seem like it fits that. There should be another title for it other than school resource.
Well, that's the whole, I believe that's the purpose of that title. is to-
I don't know.
Disguise what it actually is, right?
But there are, as the undersheriff spoke of, there are specific guidelines for a school resource officer. Any further discussion on that? Okay, thank you. The minutes were under consent. The coaches, additional winter coaches, this was on, the winter coaches was on the October 3rd meeting, and there was questions regarding Brian Van Nordstrom and Michael Bringley as far as going on leave. Any further explanation or?
Yeah, Mr. Van Nostrand, so also in this personnel matter is the appointment of 2 volunteer coaches. And for hockey, Nick Moran has been a regular contributor as a volunteer coach for many years. And Ron Rossi, who's been an active member of the coaching staff for basketball for also a number of years. After the board raised the question at the last meeting, we did discuss this with the athletic program, and so what we'd like to do is to go ahead with the appointment of Brian Van Nostrand as the coach, with the understanding that during the time when his wife is giving birth, that he may miss a practice here or there, and he also may miss an away game here or there. We can't be specific, but within reason, Mr. Rossi has agreed to sort of step in and take on that role. We don't really expect that Mr. Van Nostren will be missing a lot of time in the coaching area, but for those few times that he will miss, that Mr. Rossi would step in. And again, he's very experienced, and we trust him with that, in that role. And for Michael Bringley, just a little bit different, that Michael Bringley is the co-coach for the girls' SLP hockey team, and he and Bill Peer, Saranac Lake coach, are the co-coaches there. And again, in a similar way, we don't expect Mr. Bringley to miss an extended period of time, but for those days that he might, that Coach Peer would pick up the slack there. So it's not terribly inconsistent with how we've done some other coaching maternity leaves. Before I came to the meeting tonight, I was at the cross-country meet, and Coach Bailey Fermonte was coaching the modified team with her newborn baby in a baby pack right in front. And we had appointed as a volunteer assistant John Fermonte, who was also there providing support for the team. We've also done that with Mel Frazier, who's the boys and girls cross-country coach, as well as the track coach. And there was one other position that we had a similar kind of experience with. So we've been pretty good about, I wasn't Heather Brewer last year, we actually replaced her. Yes. So we have made some decisions that are similar to this, so I think this would be consistent.
So the recommended action is, upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve the following additional coaches and volunteers for the 2018-2019 winter sports season. Need a motion for approval?
Yes.
Colleen, second?
Yes.
Thank you, Liam.
I think it's great that Ron and Nick have volunteered for so many years and given of themselves. I think it's really awesome on their part.
Please
Yes.
vote. 6-4-0 against, the motion passes. Excuse me. Next is a contract approval. At the request of this board, Mr. Leonard Sowers has agreed to a contractual agreement with this district. The contract is in your document. This will cover any consultation with Leonard as we continue the transition of the business office. And upon recommendation of the superintendent, approve the attached financial consultant agreement with Mr. Leonard Sowers. Do I have a motion?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
I think it's a great idea, and even though there is a cost with it, I think that it's important to, I think one of our goals was transition, to aid in transition, and I think that it will pretty be near crucial to have him involved, at least in the short term. So yes.
Anybody else? Vote please. That's 6-4-0 against, the motion passes. Action items. Need to do anything with the school resource or just leave it off? Okay. Certification of lead evaluators was on the consent agenda.
This last one should have been.
Sports merger approval. Recommended action be it resolved that Lake Placid Central School approves the girls' Nordic merger with Keene Central School for a period of 1 year effective for the 2018-2019 school year. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. And a second?
Yes.
Thank you. Questions, comments?
I think it was great to hear the girls say, you know, that how much they've really enjoyed having the mergers. And
Yeah, that's great.
I think it's fantastic.
Vote, please. 6-4-0 against, the motion passes. Special education is informational only. Any questions? That's the packet for November 6th, 2018.
I did provide you with some backup notes there, not specific ones, but just if there is any need to hold an executive session to discuss any one particular or another, let us know. Sarah Allen's going to be attending the meeting anyway, making a presentation, so if need be, she could come a little early for an executive session.
Moving on to the adjournment phase. Next meeting, November 6, 2018, 6:30, right here. Old agenda topics, sort of threw a pile on last time.
I just copied and pasted.
At the agenda setting meeting, perhaps we can put one or two of these into the discussion. I won't bore you by reading those. Are there any that are come to the surface that anybody would like to discuss?
What is the component school district advisory committee?
That's a BOCES advisory group.
Okay.
The date for that has changed. Did you note that?
No.
Yeah, they changed it from the early November date. They pushed it back.
We were, correct me if I'm wrong, but we were sort of the
Yes.
district behind getting together some sort of a committee to look into administrative
Right, this is the
budgets.
group that was formed in response to school districts like ours who expressed concern that communication and agreement on things like the administrative budget weren't open or understandable or agreed upon. And so we did do this a couple of years ago, and BOCES is recommending reinstituting it. I think especially as during last year, there was not a consensus support for the BOCES administrative budget, in particular from our board.
Okay, so we'll look these over and see which ones that we'll put on the agenda for the next meeting. Any new agenda topics? All right, adjournment of the meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Thank you, Colleen. Second?
Yes.
Thank you, Jeff. All in favor?
Aye.
And thank you for this lovely green certificate.
Thank you very much.
Well, I would love to
nice.
And I
take
have dessert
full.
too.
I know, but what a nice gesture. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Karen behind the scenes.
I believe there is one more celebration. Is that right, Shannon?
Yeah, I have dessert.
Wow.
So, once again.
Wow. Very, very nice.
Build an addition of all these things.
Josh,